Welcome to another part of the Vertex animation characters. This part we're going to take the Unreal side of things a bit more. So here I'm already in Unreal. I have not imported any of my data. I'm going to do that, but first of all, what is importantly is that you have also access to the Vertex animation shaders. Otherwise, you cannot do much with the textures and the geometry. So I have here installed the plugin. So here all the way down, I have SideFX Labs content. You also need to enable here the plugin, show plugin content, but I will show you where we can get that. In Houdini, we can actually go here to our real-time shader tab and we can click this button and this will open a menu on how you can install the Vertex animation shaders for your current Unreal version. This is also the same one for Unity as well. We have videos about this that go a bit more in detail on how to install them, but quickly here you can just grab the version and then you can read the installation guide. So that's for your information. Then what actually comes down into importing our information. So here I have my geometry. In this case, I have two meshes, but they are probably exact the same. So I'm only going to import the idle one. And in here, we can go into our options. And there might be some things we might want to change to have actually the proper result. So what we will do is we will actually disable most of the toggles here, except for the transform vertex to absolute. And for importing the normals, we want to do both normals and tangent space. So those are some settings to look out for. You can also make sure if you are using vertex color, make sure you are replacing them. So every time you import that, then you will get the data. So that's sort of it for the setting, and click import. So now I have here my basic mesh, so the basic static geometry. And as you can see, this is the exact same first frame result. And then we're going to go to my texturing folder. We have our textures here. You will see that there is a color, position, and rotation. The color is currently not really used, but that can be used if you want to store multiple data, you can do that. So here we drag and drop that in and they will be seen as these textures. Now they need to actually be set to specific settings. And if you have installed the plugin, you can just select all of them and you can click right click, scripted action, and you can use the SideFX VAT texturing. And that will be saved and it will be set to specific things. So what will happen here is that the texturing, for example, is set to an HDR compression. Important here is to have no mid-maps, and also the filter is set to nearest because every single pixel matters. So these are some settings that need to be changed. Now let's make the material for it, like a master material. So right click, material. We can just call it VAT character. And this will then be the master character material. So you should be able to, when you type in VAT, have a couple nodes of them. And we're going to use, of course, the soft body deformations. Since we, of course, used soft body options in Houdini, we will use them here as well. So we have a bunch of things we can do. For our base color, for example, I did not have any special things. I can just even plug in my own custom color. If you have a unique texture, you can still plug in your own textures in here. Like if you already had an unwrap and specific textures for this, you can just plug this in the normal way. A couple more unique things to do here is we can see that we have our world position, of course, because the world position is the part that will actually deform and offset your points of the geometry. And we also need to have the UV parts here. So in this node, we're going to go here. You might have to open this menu and we're going to enable custom UVs. And we want to have 5 of them. And we're just going to connect up the sides to each other. So this is custom UV 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's done. So these are the main things you want to connect. Like I said, if you have custom colors, you can always connect that here like so. In my case, I have not any custom colors. So if you connect the normals, we need to enable the tangent space off. So here, let me quickly search for that. So tangent space, and enable this off and press save. Now, how do I plug in my textures? We have to go back here and we have to actually make an instance. And this is then for my first animation, which is then idle 1. So we can say vertex animation idle 1 and open this. you will then have this menu with your settings, and we can then here input a position and a rotation. So here we have idle 1, so position and rotation, and press save. So when I now would drag my material, so here on my character, we should be able to see this result. And by default, it will probably just work. So this this will probably just work. Now let's also just make a duplicate here of my instance. And this is then idle number 2. Let's open idle 2 and input my other texture here. And press save. So now I'm gonna copy the same geometry. So this is the exact same geometry. And we're gonna plug in here my other material. And now, as you can see, they are both using the same geometry, but only using different textures. So the texture right now is actually, again, holding that information. Like if you would use bone system, you would then import different bone animations. But in this case, we are just using textures. And as you can see here, the size of the textures are 1000 by 600. So if you want to lower this resolution, you need to have either less points or less frame numbers. So you can even turn this into like even lower sizes of textures if you are careful with like how many frames I have and how many points does my mesh have. So that might be interesting to play around and even reduce that further if that would be interesting to your project. Now, there are a couple things that we want to tweak is that you will see that we will sometimes have that T pose or the default first frame pose. So we need to filter that out with the shader. So we're going to open our master shader here. And we want to here do a display override. We want to override the frames. So we're going to build a system for that. So what we need to do is we need to get our time. And let's multiply this by 24 frames. So 24. And we can then multiply this by just, for example, the speed of the time. So speed time, for example, which can be just 1 by default. Once we have that, I'm going to make then another parameter here, and that is the total frames. So total frames, and this is the value you used in Houdini. So for my cases, it was 120. If you do different values, you need to then tweak this. So in my case, 120. With that value, we want to then use an fmod. So plug it in like so. And further down, we need to do a clamp. So we are clamping between different frames. So we can, for example, say that clamp between frame 2 and frame 120. So we only will see the results of frame 2 and 120. So this can be something that you can tweak if you feel it should be tweaked. But let's now plug it in over here and test it if that would work. So let's press save. And what we will see is it doesn't really do anything. So we will still have the same result. So if we take a closer look at the actual node, we can have this helping menu. And in here, it is saying that this will basically get ignored if auto playback is on. So in our settings here, when we have here the auto playback, when this is on, it will basically ignore the code that it just made. So we need to say that we don't want to have the auto playback. And now we will actually have like the proper part without like the T-pose or the first frame. So you can see like this is as expected. And now we can just speed these up. If I want this to be faster, or if I want this just to be like a bit slower, we can play around with that. We can also here, like I mentioned before, we can enable interplay between frames. This will make the animation smoother. So if we go down a lot in frames, it will still, like, as you can see, it will still be able to like smooth out the frames. Like the movement is not really like choppy, it's like quite smoothingly blending between frame 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. So that can be interesting if you want to lower the play speed and so on. So let's just keep it like 0.8 or something. And we need to do the same thing then here as well. So disable auto playback. And we might want to enable here interpolation. And we can then quickly speed this up or down You can always go back here and start again, like tweaking these things. You can do all kinds of things here. Like you can make it quite complicated and advanced, but this is like how you could do it, sharing the same geometry. And that was it for this video. So I mainly showed you how you can import all the information, and then also how can we then filter out different frames that we actually want and need. So we now have one single mesh that can be controlled by textures on animation. So I can now copy these characters and just swap out different textures. So the more textures I have, the more again animation and variation I can lay upon these characters. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.